Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel and we tend to focus on theories of everything. Mostly things that are pretty obscure that you've never heard of before, and today is no exception. Today we're doing our 246th video on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. Mr. Larson was an engineer, lived in the 20th century, and he had his first inklings into the reciprocal system about 1930. Came out with his fundamental postulates, two fundamental postulates, in the late 1950s, and then he started writing books from there, using a process of deduction from his postulates. So he had his postulates, and then if this is true, then that's true. And if that's true, then this is true. And he developed an entire theoretical universe about how the universe operates based on his fundamental postulates. Wrote books on many different subjects, but especially chemistry, physics, and astronomy, and then also economics and metaphysics, including philosophy, religion, and psychology, and died back in 1990. Left behind a little bit of a following, including a few different people who were dedicated to carrying his work forward, diversifying his work, and straightening out a few of the little kinks that Larson had in the system, not due to the fact that the theory was incorrect, but more due to his ability to apply the theory in his deductive manner. He made a few missteps, at least in my opinion, and those were, several of them were corrected. And one of the main guys to correct a lot of his theories was Dr. Bruce Perret, who we're going to look at today. We've been going over Dr. Perret's Daniel papers. He wrote a number of papers under the pen name of Daniel Phoenix III, who was supposed to have been a computer programmer on the Montauk Project, which was a top secret black ops government project from the 1980s, mainly having to do with time travel. And there were a number of other well-known people on that project, including Al Bielek and can't remember the name of the other guy, Duncan Cameron. Even the football coach Pete Carroll was involved to a certain extent. And so we're going to be going over his paper that got the title of Homo sapiens ethicus, life, death, reincarnation, and ascension, part 3 of the anthropology series on the hidden origins of Homo sapiens. And but let me just give you a quick rundown of the reciprocal system. Basically, Larson is saying that we live in a universe made out of motion. Not matter, not energy, but motion. And motion for Larson was the relationship between space and time that sets up a generalized reciprocal relationship between space and time. Space and time, in his first postulate, he gives them 3 different qualities that are notable. One is that space and time both have their coordinate aspects, meaning that they come in 3 or more dimensions. Something that we're accustomed to with space, but not so much with time. 3 or more dimensions of time. And then they both have their clock aspects, something that we're accustomed to with time, but not so much with space. Time is always getting later and later and later, the flow of time or the progression of time. But so too with space. space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. That is the progression or the flow of space. Time and space also have their discrete units, meaning that they come in only discrete units. There is no continuity involved in space or time. You either have one unit or you don't have any. And the universe is made out of space and or time. So if you don't have any space, you have nothing but time. And so Larson calls those the space region and the time region. Space region is where you have less than 1 unit of time. And the time region is where you have less than 1 unit of space. Those are both subunits of the two major sectors of the universe, which Larson calls the material sector and the cosmic sector. And those arise from the unit speed boundary. If you have 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, that is the speed of light. The speed of light is what Larson calls unit speed. And so there is an entire half of the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. And Larson calls that the cosmic sector. And then there's a half of the universe that's moving slower than the speed of light. That's what we're familiar with. That is called the material sector. Within the material sector, you have the time region. And so within the cosmic sector, you have the space region. And in the material sector, you have 3 dimensions of space and clock time, progressing time. In the cosmic sector, you have 3 dimensions of time. And you have clock, space, progressing space, always getting farther and farther apart. So those are some of the basic relationships that come from the postulates of the reciprocal system. Then he took those postulates and he derived, things like the periodic table and the laws of Newton's laws and so on from those original postulates. And he does much of that in. I did 15 videos earlier on his what a talk that he gave called the deductive development of the reciprocal system. And so you might want to look back on how he actually the steps he went through. There's about 165 different steps that he went through to arrive at his theoretical universe. And so you can check those out from maybe about 6 months ago. Okay, now we will get into this part of the paper that's called biological energy from Perret. And this is, I believe, the 3rd episode that we've spent on this particular paper. So, if you want to get filled in, you might want to watch the 2 previous videos to get this whole paper. I think it's a pretty important paper. Okay, biological energy. Biological energy, or bioenergy, is the level 2 version of electrical, magnetic, and gravitational forces, where these atomic properties are intermixed with their conjugates. The temporal antimatter version of force and energy that comprises the invisible cosmic half of the life unit, the anima. What this interaction does is to create an energetic aura around both the spatial corpus, the body, and the temporal anima, the mind, what is termed the etheric body. Okay, this section is called the aura of life units. The unobservable half of the life unit existing in 3-dimensional time. Now just remember, in the cosmic sector, the three-dimensional time, we do not see time. We only see space. So when something happens in the cosmic sector, we do not see it that way. We see it how it affects space. And so many times we're seeing the inverse action. And we went through the white dwarf star as an example of that. A white dwarf star is a star that is exploding in time because the explosion is going beyond the speed of light. So the explosion in time we don't see, but what we see is the reciprocal or the inverse of that. And so what we actually see is an implosion in space. And so we see it as a super dense, small star that is imploding in space. And so that's one thing you have to understand about the cosmic sectors. We don't see time. We see how it affects space. And it does so in an inverse manner. So the unobservable half of the life unit existing in three-dimensional time casts its shadow around the life unit for the same cause and reason that electric and magnetic fields cast their shadow about inanimate structures. Except in the case of the life unit, they are referred to as auras. These auras form the etheric double of an organism, which is the shadow of the anima about the corpus, the body in space. All life has an aura, and the aura reflects the condition of the cosmic half of the life unit, its soul. The soul is the seat of emotion, so the etheric double tends to reflect the emotional state of the life unit. A second auric field, not generally advertised by mystics, also forms around the cosmic anima, creating an analogous structure to the etheric body that surrounds the physical body. This material double shows the condition of the physical body to the intuitive side of life, which is how a person can perceive that someone feels sick, as mothers always seem to know about their children, regardless of how far away they are. Being a non-local connection, it works analogously to the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen bridge, the EPR bridge, because the souls can remain adjacent in time as a type of soul group for family and friends, while the body may be separated by significant spatial distances. This brings up the concept of non-locality. Something can be adjacent, right next to you in time, but it is distant in space. And certain things such as the cosmic microwave background radiation comes to the material sector non-locally. And so we see it as being spread out over all space. It doesn't have a preference in space. And so we see it as a very low level of radiation, but spread relatively, basically uniformly over all of space. Okay, this section is called Forms of Bioenergy. The life unit can be considered a more complete expression of scalar motion because it contains both sectors in a single cellular structure. Now recall, scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no direction. So it is something that you measure as a scale. The scale's getting bigger or the scale's getting smaller. That's a balloon with a magic marker. You put a bunch of dots on the balloon, you blow up the balloon. The scale is getting larger. All of the dots are moving away from each other, but in no particular direction. You suck in the balloon, that's an inward scalar motion. All of the dots are moving toward each other, but in no particular direction. The scale is getting smaller. Okay, so a more complete expression of scalar motion because it contains both sectors in a single cellular structure. Atoms and particles, being either spatial or temporal, only have half the story, so to speak. Whereas the universe is defined by 3 dimensions of motion, it is only natural that we would find 3 expressions of bioenergy in living organisms, reflecting the 3 speed ranges associated with astronomical motion. Okay, now that is a core structure that is part of the reciprocal system, is the 3 speed ranges. Perret usually uses the term 1 to x, 2 to x, and 3 to x. I think it's actually 1 minus x, 2 minus x, and 3 minus x. But those are the speed ranges. The low speed range, 1 minus x, meaning that it's the speed is less than 1, less than unit speed. And the intermediate speed range, 2 minus x, meaning between 1 and 2 units. And then the ultra high speed range, 3 minus x, meaning between 2 and 3 units of speed. And the rules are a little bit different in each one of those speed ranges. Okay. Every culture has its own names for these 3 forms of bioenergy. So what Perret does a lot is he compares 3 things like this with the speed ranges. So he's plugging in the forms of bioenergy into the speed ranges. Every culture has its own names for these forms of bioenergy. For the purposes of this analysis, the Chinese terms will be used. We've got Jing, which is cellular, libido, or sexual energy associated with health, and the corpus. That is the 1 minus x range. And then in the 2 minus x range, you have chi, or prana. So I guess he's also using the Sanskrit terms. Chi or prana, life force associated with the anima. And then Shen or Kundalini as the 3 minus x, consciousness, spiritual and intellectual energy associated with the animus or spirit. I'm trying to just look here at the footnotes. He talks about the material double, and wormholes, and yeah, so stellar events and life units actually have a lot in common with the way they interact at faster than light velocities. One can almost consider a cell to be a thermally balanced microscopic star. Okay, we all know that to store energy you need some kind of battery, and complex biological systems come with such batteries, known in Chinese as dantians, or the alchemical elixir field. The elixir itself is another form of bioenergy. If you look into books on Taoist yoga, they talk about the elixir. So the elixir itself is another term for bioenergy. And we have generally three dantians. The first one is down a little above the genitals, a couple inches, maybe a little bit below the navel. And that is the 1 minus X low speed storage area of Jing. And then we have the Dantian that, excuse me, at the Dantian that corresponds to the 2 minus X intermediate speed that is in the chest area. And then we have the 3 minus X ultra high speed Dantian corresponds to Shen. The second one corresponds to Qi, and the third one corresponds to Shen. That one is in the head, I guess, like the middle of the forehead, and right here, and third eye maybe, and that is corresponding to 3 minus X. These structures, being rotational in nature, exist in an analog to Larson's equivalent space, though more aptly named equivalent motion, for a life unit, as the equivalency includes the merging of equivalent space with equivalent time. These equivalent motion structures are not directly observable from our conventional reference system, but are localized at 3 areas in the body, as indicated, and can strongly affect both the physical corpus and the temporal anima. They operate much like a charged electron, where the Dantian is the electron putting out lines of force, called meridians, throughout the body to collect and distribute bioenergy. Okay, that's the end of that section. So the next section is starting with Jing. Then the Jing is the low speed form of biological energy, corresponding to the lower Dantian. And we will start up with that when we resume tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.